Wow, I got everybody on the screen from the jump. That's okay. Hey, welcome to Making Learning Addictive. I am your host, Brian Romero Smith, and we truly appreciate you joining us this evening on a Wednesday. We know it's hump day. A lot of stuff that's going on. Hoping that you had a great first half of the week, and we're truly wishing that you have an even better latter half of the week. Tonight, we are going to continue with our mental health awareness month, so to speak. We are in the mental health awareness month, but yes, we have started a mental health awareness and SEL series here on Making Learning Addictive. Now, how that ties in, let me explain. So, Making Learning Addictive is all about helping everyone who wants to be a lifelong learner fall in love with learning for learning's sake. That's all it is. We want to make sure that learning is not a hindrance. As long as you spend a little time a day perfecting your craft by learning something new, it can be addictive. That's what we're about here. So tonight, we got my peeps, Alicia and Calvin on. What's going on, y'all? How y'all doing? You good? Hailing from Alabama and North Carolina, and I'm here in Texas. So we're handling the southern region here. But I guess it's going to bring some West Coast flavor to the conversation tonight. But before we bring her and introduce her officially, let me read her bio here real quick for you. So we have Dr. Ilana Nankin on with us tonight. She's a former pre-K teacher, God bless her, and a yoga instructor. And while pursuing her PhD in education at the University of Wisconsin, she launched the only 200-hour yoga training program designed just for us teachers. The program was born out of a research showing the positive effect of teacher wellness on student learning through the course of the pandemic. She trained thousands of teachers to apply yoga and socio-emotional learning strategies, not only in their own personal lives, but in the classroom, helping to mitigate burnout, which we talked about recently, and trauma, while addressing the push for education equity. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Ilana Nankin.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for this conversation.
Well, thank you for joining us. So Breathe for Change. That's your thing, right?
That's my thing. It is my heart's passion. It is everything that I love and that I believe the world needs. And I just keep going, keep creating, keep collaborating with educators everywhere to make this vision become a reality in our schools and communities all over.
Okay. All right. So before we jump into what Breathe for Change is, you're a pre-K teacher.
That is where my heart is. The little ones, I'm a pre-K teacher through and through.
Same. I taught pre-K for 3 years, and kindergarten for 1, and first grade for 1.
Wow. They're the best.
Yeah,
they're the best.
It gets no better than the baby.
No, I went down to
exactly.
I went down to second grade 1 year, and that was the longest year of my life. So God bless both of y'all. For sure. So when you were a pre-K teacher, was yoga a part of your instructional practices?
Well, it's really interesting you asked that question because when I was teaching in my first year as a pre-K teacher, I was stressed, I was overwhelmed, I was overworked. And that's when I first found yoga. My roommate at the time was another pre-K teacher, and she'd come home like blissed out. And I was like, what is going on with you? She's like, come to yoga. And I said, no, I don't do yoga. I'm an athlete. I don't do yoga. And then finally, one day I couldn't take it anymore. And I decided to go to my first yoga class, and it was absolutely transformative for my well-being. So much so that I started going every single day to different classes before I would teach. I'd get up at 6 a.m. before my day started, and I would go to yoga, and it just transformed my well-being. So I started organically integrating some of these mind-body wellness practices into my instruction with my kids, and just saw transformative effects on them, both social, emotionally, but also academically. And I was like, there is something going on here that needs to be further explored. And as I kept going to yoga, it it made such a big impact that my students even would be like, when I was in a bad mood, Miss Ilana, did you miss yoga this morning? And like literally, I was like, you see it, you know what's going on. It's amazing. So anyways, I just saw such transformative outcomes for my students, social, emotionally, and academically, that I was like, this needs to be further explored. Like, I see something bigger here. So I ended up pursuing my PhD in curriculum and instruction and becoming a teacher educator at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. And for my dissertation, I specifically was looking at how the teachers that I was teaching in the teacher ed program would take up their ideals of social justice in action in their teaching in classrooms across the world. And what I ended up finding was that across the board, these equity-oriented educators going into the field were so stressed, they were overwhelmed, they were burning out really quickly, and that negative cycle of well-being was impacting their teaching and their ability to fulfill on their social emotional needs for their students. And as I was seeing how universal issue the issue of educator stress and burnout really is, and this is pre-pandemic, right? This is 2015. I simultaneously had just done my 200-hour yoga teacher certification, which was absolutely life-changing for me personally as well as professionally. And the students who I was teaching at the university, who were pre-service teachers, found out that I was a yoga teacher. They thought it was like the coolest thing ever in the world. And so they rented out space in the student union for me to teach them yoga every Monday, in addition to my 3-hour education courses I was teaching them in the teacher ed program. And one thing led to the next. Day after day, different teachers would come up to me and say things like, oh my gosh, Ilana, the kids who normally have anxiety attacks before tests are utilizing these breathing techniques that you taught us, and their test scores are improving. Or, students who are experiencing so much trauma in the home are learning how to breathe and move their bodies, and everything is improving. And so seeing how universal the issue of educator stress and burnout was through not only my research, also my own teaching experience, and then also how powerful these wellness and social emotional learning and yoga practices can truly be for both educators and students' lives, I was like, all right, world, nothing is going to stop me. I'm starting a movement. It's going to enhance the health and well-being of educators, students, and entire communities. And I'm running the world's only 200-hour wellness, SEL, and yoga teacher training that is specifically for the most important humans in the world, our wonderful educators. And so I somehow managed to convince 34 teachers that it was this extraordinary idea to come to Madison, Wisconsin, the middle of the country, for this 200-hour thing that had never existed before. And that was in the summer of 2015. And at that time, it was this, 16 to 18 day intensive program. And it was absolutely transformational for the 34 teachers. And, that's really when the movement just exploded and took off, because the ripple effects that happened as a result of what our graduates were doing in their schools and their communities and just larger districts, world, was remarkable and is still growing today.
That is amazing.
Wow.
Thanks.
Right.
I know. I kind of can't believe it's real, because I pinch myself. The impact that is happening as a result of what these incredible educators are committed to bringing into their communities it's a gift that keeps on giving, and something that I think, truly is creating a more socially just and peaceful world. And I hope, only continues to have that impact.
I have a question.
Maybe I'll have an answer.
I have always wanted to get into yoga, but I never could, because I don't know how to shut everything out. Like, how do you teach? With educators, we have so much going on. We have our professional lives and we have our personal lives, and sometimes they collide.
Oh yeah.
Without even trying to, because they always say leave your problems in the car or leave them outside. Sometimes that's hard to do because we're humans. So how do you teach teachers to shut everything out and focus on the moment. Because that's what I struggle with. I don't know about y'all, but I can't shut it off. Like sometimes I can't even sleep at night because I'm thinking about, oh, I should have did this. Oh, I want to do this. What is my next step? What am I going to do in life? I want to be the president. Like all this stuff going on in your head. So how do you teach teachers to shut it out and focus on themselves in that moment?
I would actually turn that around and say, I don't teach them to shut it out. I teach them to fully embrace and accept everything that is present, to observe what's here, to accept what's here, and then to create the reality that you want from that place of presence and full self-acceptance. I think so often as educators, as leaders, we are constantly giving ourselves to everyone else, right? That we forget to give that same self-love and care to ourselves. And so the practices that we teach, the approach that we take through our training is that we begin with what we call transformation of self, which is us focusing on prioritizing and cultivating our own well-being so that we can do that critically important work that every single one of us is here to do, or we would not be in the profession, let's be honest. So it's not about saying no to that voice inside our head. I like to call it the itty bitty shitty committee. That is going to go off all the time. And it's about how do we be with every emotion that is showing up. If we're feeling sad, if we're feeling pissed off, if we're feeling angry, if we're feeling joyful, how can we be with that, fully accept it, honor it, not try and shut it away. Honor it. Our emotions need to be seen. They need to be felt. They need to be heard. They need to be valued, all of them. And that's the whole of who we are. And when we can be with the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? Mm-hmm. That's when transformation can become possible. So the way that we work with our teachers and our training is we open up space for everyone to honor who they are, to acknowledge what are my intentions for my well-being. What does my physical well-being look like? What does my mental well-being look like? What does my own social emotional well-being look like? What does it look like for me to actually embody the social emotional learning competencies and mind body wellness practices that we hope to teach our kids? What does it look like for me to actually live and breathe that first? And then from that foundation of our own well-being, how do we show up fully and enhance well-being in our relationships and all the relationships that matter to us, whether that's the relationships with our students, the relationships with our colleagues, the relationships with our loved ones. Let's be honest, those impact us so much, right? And then from there, we explore how do we show up fully in our community and really learn to utilize wellness, SEL, and yoga as vehicles for healing and social change across all of our communities. So it starts right from here and building that close relationship with ourselves. And I think no one said it better. They'll bring it back to pre-K than my former pre-K student, Patrick, who one time I was like, hey, everyone, what does community mean to you? And he's adorable. Patrick raised his hand and said, well, in a community, first you have to love yourself, because if you don't love yourself, you can't love anybody else. This is why pre-K students are geniuses. We got to listen to them. And I think that shoulding that you're talking about, that the inability for us to turn it off, we're human. We're never going to be able to fully turn it off. But what we can do is we can embody these practices. We can cultivate a daily well-being practice. We can take some moments for ourselves that allow us to ultimately enhance our well-being over time, which is going to decrease that reactivity, that itty bitty shitty committee that, can take over. And so how do we draw on these powerful practices, these social emotional learning strategies, these mind body wellness practices to actually shift our current reality? And I think that's how I would kind of turn what you said and offer a different approach to needing to turn it off. How do we turn it on? Let's turn it on. Let's elevate what's going on and celebrate it and be with it and create space for us to connect to each other. And I think that's where community building really is critical for us too.
because I always say feel your feelings, but you put a different meaning to that. Like, and I love it. Now I really want to do yoga now. Like,
Right.
when they started class.
Oh yeah, there was a huge sense of calm, you know,
Yeah.
when she said that, you know, from that perspective. So that was
That's revolutionary. I used to dabble with hot yoga back in the day. So
That's where I started too.
Oh yeah, hot yoga was the best. It was the best. And I just have to say, like I told you in the green, like I am a really big fan. As I was preparing for tonight's episode, like your dissertation to me just really blew my mind because as an educator working with schools, my mom's a teacher. I've seen the stresses of what can come, you know, day to day. So connecting like how if the teachers are stressed, the students might be stressed. So, you know, really spreading this practice of like SEL and yoga to me is like really revolutionary. When I was in grad school, I took an expressive arts class. And, you know, I'll be honest, I'm a Black kid from Southeast Raleigh. I did not know what expressive arts was until I took that class. Where I'm from, we don't do those things. But I'm glad I learned it because I'm able to take it back to my community as another outlet versus like the traditional ways of just, you know, suck it off or just, you know, have a better day. So I would just kind of like love to talk about how you were able to expand, you know, this revolutionary act from 34 people to all over the country.
It's so amazing to reflect back on the whole evolution of this movement. So after the 34 teachers graduated in 2015, they were going back to their schools, starting mindfulness programs, integrating SEL into all aspects of their instruction. They were creating, you know, yoga clubs for the kids, family wellness nights. I mean, they were integrating mind-body wellness practices into their staff meetings, you know, teaching other teachers at their schools how to like, you know, lead some of the practices, like even starting your class with 3 collective breaths. Do it with me. Ready? Take a deep breath in. Deep breath out. Again, inhale. Exhale. Breathe in. Out with a huge sigh. Now just take a moment, maybe bring your hands over your heart if that feels comfortable for you, and just notice how you feel after those 3 collective breaths. Let me hear it. How do you feel?
Happy. I can't stop smiling. Probably because you're amazing, but I still can't stop smiling. So, yeah.
Feel the same about you. So the reason I just facilitated that for you is to just demonstrate that this is not complicated. Right? I think so often we think, oh my gosh, well, there's so much I need to do and I don't have time to fit it in. And, you know, I got to check off all the to-do lists, finish all the lesson plans, make sure I achieve all the objectives that I'm here to achieve from support my students in achieving. But this is about how we teach. And these practices can be integrated in moments and can make such a profound difference. Starting your class with 3 collective breaths, doing a 2-word check-in, having people notice how they feel and then share their 2 words with the community. Oh, I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling happy. Then as a teacher, you have the ability to respond and be so much more effective in facilitating a meaningful space for your students when you know how they feel. So anyways, they're integrating all these practices that we teach through our social emotional learning and facilitation curriculum. So at Breathe for Change, we tag on the F to SEL, spells self, social emotional learning and facilitation, because we believe it's so critically important for us as educators and leaders to embody the practices that we teach. So our teachers were not just teaching at their students, none of this mandated top-down thing. They're doing it with their students. And that's, I think, what sets Breathe for Change apart when it comes to how we embrace social emotional learning. It is us embodying, living, breathing the practices and competencies that we want to instill in our students. And so our teachers were doing this all over the place, and the ripple effects were happening. So the next year, I was like, all right, we're taking it home for me, which is the Bay Area. So we expanded to the Bay Area and New York City, and I had a previous fellowship at Sesame Workshop when I was in my PhD, and I did a lot of research for them, I loved them. And so they ended up hosting our New York City training. So when Elmo and Big Bird literally walked in with all the educators in my training, I was like, we're on to something. So that second year in 2016, we certified 185 teachers across 3 cities. And then the next year, 600 across 6 cities, and then 1,100 across 11 cities. And it kept growing. And as you can imagine, one teacher impacts their students, impacts their school community, impacts the families that they serve. So like, we really believe, like, our whole theory of change is that it starts with us deeply transforming ourselves as leaders. And then from the individual educator and leader who's committed to transforming themselves, that transformation will create incredible change for the better in communities. And so we kept growing. Then the pandemic hit. Let's be honest, there's all a pre-pandemic world, and there's like a current / hopefully soon post world pandemic world. But when the pandemic hit, we were in the middle of 5 trainings that were happening across the country. Right in the middle of them, there was hundreds of educators in our training at that time, and we had to pause and ended up interviewing hundreds of educators and administrators working in schools and said, what do you need and how can we help? And it became so clear that educator stress and burnout was getting more and more, or becoming more and more of an elevated issue, one that was definitely an issue before the pandemic, but became a lot more obvious during the pandemic. And the other thing that was obvious was that student mental health and social emotional learning was crucial. And again, something that was always important and always something that needed to be cared for. But I think with the presence of the pandemic, it became obvious to a lot more people that this needs to be top priority. And so immediately within 1 week, said, you know what, we're taking our trainings, we're going online. And we finished the trainings for those cohorts that were in person. We transitioned them online, and then very, very quickly decided, you know what, we're going to take the entire 200-hour training, make it as accessible and inclusive to diverse educators who are working in communities that don't typically have access to wellness. And that needs to be top priority. And so the last year alone, we certified about 2,500 educators across the country and world who are impacting, now we have 6,000 graduates. Actually, it's growing because we keep graduating more cohorts. And this year we'll be certifying about 4,000 to 5,000 more educators and leaders. And I have the unbelievable privilege and honor of leading. Not only designing the trainings, because designing transformative, life-changing experiences, literally my life's passion, and it's just who I am and what I do. But I also get to co-facilitate the trainings with the most amazing and diverse group of educator leaders and wellness experts that I know. And our mission is to ensure that we're not only, bringing these practices, into educators' lives to support their well-being and also to support the well-being and social emotional learning of our students, but that we do so in a way that honors that ensures diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that is the foundation of our work. You cannot do SEL without talking about equity. You cannot teach these practices without doing so in a trauma-informed way. Right. You cannot, I as a white woman coming from a privileged background can't pretend that my identity is not impacting how I'm showing up in spaces. And so all of this is connected, and it's very much a commitment of ours to ensure equity in everything that we're doing. And so, over 50% of our trainers identify as BIPOC or someone with a disability or LGBT plus. And so it is, especially with the body that I am living in, I recognize that it's even more of my responsibility to be incredibly intentional about the ways in which we are bringing these practices and ultimately sharing these practices with, millions of people all over. Yeah. So
I really want to give you like the biggest, because I'm up here wiping tears away because I'm very passionate about mental health, SEL, based on my history with it. But I am amazed at like you see yourself, you see your privilege, and you're still using that to help people who didn't have the same upbringing, who didn't have the same life experiences. And in Alabama last year,
I was just about to say, I'm gonna bring her to Alabama.
Bring me to Alabama. We've got teachers in Alabama. They're some of my favorites. Bring me there. Oh my God.
Last year, it was years ago, 30 years ago, yoga was banned in Alabama.
Yep. I know.
And last year it was approved to come back. Like, so you are amazing. Like, I want to hug you in real life, and it needs to happen. Like, because
either I'll come to Alabama, you come to San Francisco, or we'll meet in the middle.
It's so amazing the work that you're doing. And like Craig said, I'm a fan. Like, you got a groupie in me, so.
You got to come take the training. We're going to make it happen. We're going to make it happen.
We got 100%.
Well, I want to show this video here real quick, because you truly are making a difference, and we have some educators that has spoken to that here. We're going to show that to the audience here real quick.
Oh.
I'm being told you can't hear that, huh?
No.
Yeah, I can hear it. I was like, maybe it's just me.
Yeah, I was like, maybe I can hear it differently on the other.
That is hilarious. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not sure if you could tell the gratitude that they were showing, from their facial expressions, but I'll get that audio up for you here in just a second here. I know what happened, so let's go ahead and restart that if y'all don't mind. Yeah, okay with that?
There we go.
First of all, we want to thank you, Ilana, for just having a space for us. This felt like home.
Yoga is so much more than breathing in asanas, and this experience was so much more than yoga.
It was like being seen for your authentic self when you came for Breathe for Change.
It has given us empowerment, strength, courage, inspiration, and lasting community. Oh my God, I'm getting all teary.
The way you put it together, you just made us all feel so validated.
It reminds me of the time when I was being witnessed. That's what I feel like on the screen, that we're all witnessing each other.
We discovered a true sense of belonging, and we found healing, reflection, and tons of personal growth.
And what I imagine that you're all saying to us, our teachers, is you make a difference, and we are never, ever giving up on you.
Breathe for Change, our mentors, we thank you all so much for creating this opportunity for us to just continue to spread love.
I grow, you grow, we grow. Thank you.
How incredible is that? And by the way, cousin Brandon, let us know that he couldn't hear, but he said everybody looks extreme Extremely gracious.
It was part of the mindfulness practice.
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, so what's next with what you're doing with Brief for Change?
So, I'm
Uh-oh.
hearing an echo. Are you hearing an echo with me?
I am.
Here, let me. Is that better? One second.
It's all good. This is, we understand technology, how it works. We're flexible. Unlike my flexibility with yoga, where I am flexible with the technology.
Right. Is
Yes.
it something when you see to make sure to hear? Did you change something?
Nope, but we should be good now, though.
Okay.
You still hear it?
All right. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we
Yeah,
can hear you.
Yeah, there we go.
Mhm.
Hey.
The text comes to me.
I was saying that the video that you did when it was silent, it was part of our mindfulness practice. It's just observing what is present. It's like almost like you did it on purpose.
I'm gonna say I did it on purpose, y'all. You just
See, it's like accepting what's so, right?
Indeed.
Strong and wrong.
Wow.
So you asked me what's the vision for moving forward?
Yes.
Yeah, so much. I mean, with the 200-hour training, I hope to bring it to as many educators around, in the country and around the world as humanly possible. And so we're going to continue to offer our trainings. We also just launched our 300-hour transformative teaching and leadership training just a couple months ago for our graduates who really want to take their teaching and leadership to the next level, which is so exciting because we have hundreds of educators who are like, I didn't get enough. Like, I want to keep going because, whether they did it 7 years ago or they just graduated, the transformations that have unfolded for them as a result of just diving into this journey are enormous. And they're recognizing this is a lifelong practice. This is a lifelong community they want to be a part of. So that's another thing that's super exciting is now we're really learning to support our graduates who are out there doing remarkable work in the world. And then also we are so excited to be launching our Breathe for Change community membership so that educators everywhere, all over the country and world can access practices to support their own well-being, as well as, tools to integrate into their instruction, into their, school culture. And so that is something that will be coming out soon, not just for our graduates, but eventually for educators everywhere, so that we find different ways to ensure that what we offer can be accessible to everyone. So my vision is that eventually every single school and district is certified as a Breathe for Change school and district, and that these educators are equipped with these tools everywhere so that we're not seeing the levels of burnout that we're seeing, so that teachers feel honored, they feel seen, they feel heard, they feel healthy, they feel like they can do the critically important work that all of us came to education for, with the support and tools and resources and community. I'll say community is crucial. And as educators, I know it can be so stressful and it can feel isolating when we're feeling that sense of stress, and we need each other. And so I also want Breathe for Change to feel like it's the place that educators can call home, where they can come back. I mean, people who go through our training, best friends for life, no joke. I mean, they're collaborating, they're connecting on a personal level, they're, staying in touch and supporting each other well beyond graduation. And that is one of the things that I find the most beautiful about what we do, is the community that we cultivate for people. And that to me is like the biggest vision, is I want to become, the community for educators, where they feel cared for, seen, supported, and like they're given what they need to really support the mental health and social emotional needs of their students and their communities. So you're not going to be, you're not going to, this isn't the end of us having this conversation. I hope that we keep having this conversation till the day we die, and that it continues to happen beyond this generation, because it's
so well needed.
You know, it's so crucial that that we give ourselves and our kids these tools to have a better life, essentially, and obviously educational experience.
I agree 1,010%. Like I said, I'm a fan. This is a fan account, because I think this work is really needed. And, you know, as a school counselor, when I've talked to students about mindfulness and like I've done guided meditation, sometimes they look at me like they're crazy. But, you know, with kids, you can kind of talk them through. And the more that they do it, I've learned that they've enjoyed it. So going back to your piece about how like you would love for every school to be like a Breathe for Change school, which I think is great. I would love some tips on how we can get some buy-in, you know, from stakeholders about how to implement these resources in our school.
I was going to ask that same question, like with administrators and district leaders who might not agree with the practice, like how do you handle that?
No, this is like my favorite question to answer, because let me tell you, you're not the only ones that ask me this. And I think one of teachers' biggest fears about doing this work or pursuing this sort of path is the resistance that they may get along the way, especially from administrators or supervisors. And so, you know, we have an entire section in our training that's called How to Get Your Stakeholders on Board. And literally it's like, you got to give, I mean, so again, similar to go back to your first question to me about like, the shoulds, right? The whole thing is about meeting people where they're at. So how can we use inclusive language that they can hear, that lands for them, right? What I tell you versus what I tell you versus what I tell you is going to be totally different based on who you are, what experience you bring, like what your story is, what your identity is, like everything matters. And so understanding who your audience is the first step. If there's a resistance to yoga, like in Alabama, for example, right, where it's literally banned, I would never use the word yoga. I would use mindful movement. I would talk about the research behind breathing practices. I would think about, So we have a whole section in our training about how, like, inclusive wellness terminology. How do you talk about all of the things that we've been talking about in a way that someone else can hear? And now let me tell you, your administrators or the people who are, you know, responsible at the school level, at the district level, at the state level, at the national level for education, they're thinking about academic performance. So when you tell them, hey, so like social emotional learning or mind body wellness practices have been shown through research to improve academic outcomes, then they'll start listening. If you tell them, you know, when students who have experienced so much trauma actually take a few moments to connect to their breath or to do some mindful movement in the classroom, that actually will improve their test scores. It'll reduce detention. It'll reduce expulsions. Like, people start listening. So, you know, one of the ways that we try and make our training as accessible to educators as possible is we actually equip you with funding justification letters. So you can seek out funding from your administrators. We align it with, you know, the CASEL competencies, the research we talk. So, and so it's really about knowing who your audience is and speaking to their needs. And so everyone ultimately cares about this, because this is about supporting our students and our educators in being the best versions of themselves, which who doesn't want, right? It's about addressing the issue of teacher stress and burnout. It's about supporting student social emotional well-being, mental health. Everyone wants that. Like, I don't know who we could talk to that wouldn't want that, or that's a whole nother conversation.
Right, exactly.
But that we won't go, that's for another time,
Yeah.
which I'm happy to do. But, so when you can speak their language, it's absolutely possible that you can get them on board. In fact, it's not just possible, it's probable, like it's going to happen. And so the other piece that I always tell my teachers, let them experience it for themselves. It's so easy to talk about this stuff conceptually, but to experience the benefits of 3 collective breaths, to experience what it's like to move your body a little bit, to experience what it's like to connect to your emotions, to experience what it's like to practice gratitude, to do an appreciation circle, so we all share what we're thankful for about this community, about this conversation. That has an impact, and they feel it. Feeling it is way different than talking about it. So my approach is to always invite people to participate before they judge. And that's why at Breathe for Change, we have free resources for educators. We have Wednesday wellness and SEL webinars that are available to anyone. And we always encourage our educators, bring your administrators, bring your colleagues, bring whoever needs access to wellness or SEL, or who you want to get on board. Let them experience it for themselves. We also have Monday night yoga classes that are available to any educators and community leaders, so that they can feel what it's like to be in their own bodies and experience the benefit of the practice. So from there, it's so easy to get people on board, because this is research-based. It works. Like there's no questioning the practice itself if you've experienced it. And so that's definitely another level of engagement that I think is really powerful tool to use when talking about how do I get stakeholders on board? Well, come here. Let's breathe together for a moment. How do you feel now? Oh, wow. I feel calmer. I feel less stressed. I feel happy. Okay, well, that was 10 seconds. Sounds good.
Yeah. I hope my kids are not listening so they can try to use that on me when they want something from me.
That's my favorite thing, is when my students come back and they're like, hey, Miss Ilana, I think you need those belly breaths right now. All right. That's when you know it's sunk in. Yeah,
indeed. Well, Dr. Nankin, I want to thank you for joining us this evening. This has been a very fruitful conversation, very uplifting. I think that I will go back in here after this show and try my yoga activity that I tried out at lunch, but my center got in the way. But we're gonna work that out. This was liberating. This truly was liberating. So I want to thank you for that. We will have to have you back, for sure.
Anytime. I love it. And thank you all so much for holding space for this conversation, and for welcoming me with open arms, and for letting me talk about the things that I just love. So, and yeah, I'll see you in our wellness classes, in our yoga classes, hopefully in training.
Let's go.
Awesome.
Well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us this evening for another edition of Making Learning Addictive. I truly hope that you learned something, but something that you can become extremely passionate about, because wellness is real, it's necessary, and Dr. Nankin help us, welcome the itty bitty shitty committee, into our lives, so that's important to embrace that, because it is a part of our lives. And only way that we can have true wellness is if we learn to work with it within who we are. So up next, ladies and gentlemen, we're taking a week off, because I'll be in Padre Island practicing my yoga for real while we're at a conference. But we'll be back next week with Dr. Aisha Douglas, and she's going to be talking about who knows, it might go viral. All that coming on Making Learning Addictive. We'll see you next time.